In 48 hours, a wall of weather will hit Seattle. I am Ethan Hale. I design the parts of a city that are meant to hold. The one thing I could not keep standing was the life I loved. This morning on a slick dock, I slipped until a stranger's hand caught my arm. Sophie Tran, the woman who teaches water to slow down. We have one block to save from flood and one guarded heart that refuses force. In my pocket is a key I am afraid to offer. If we can redirect a storm, can we redirect a life? Stay and watch a second sunrise fight its way through the rain. The city still breathed in the rain. It rose from manhole lids like steam, drifted off the sound in low bands of fog, and tapped its patient fingers along the eaves of the old building where I rented a one-bedroom over a bakery that began kneading dough before dawn. I watched the morning spread a thin lavender over Queen Anne and the cranes that marched along the waterfront. The rails glistened. A gull shook its wings on a lamppost and shouted at nothing. I stood with a chipped mug and the memory of a hand that did not reach for it anymore. I put Hannah's ring in the top drawer last summer. I told myself that I had placed it there to keep it safe, not to hide it from the light. Grief had changed from a storm into weather. It no longer knocked me on the floor. It ran under everything like groundwater, pooling in basement corners I had not visited in months. When the wind tore through the city 2 weeks earlier, the headlines called it a once-in-a-decade event. I walked the piers the next morning with a clipboard and a camera, measuring hairline fractures and loose fasteners, speaking in clean numbers to contractors who looked out at the whitecaps and swore under their breath. Numbers steadied me. Numbers did not weep. I crossed the Ballard Bridge on foot just after 7. Waves slapped the hulls below. The low clouds opened like a curtain, a pale strip of blue showing toward the peninsula. I carried a rolled set of drawings under my arm and a thermos inside my bag. I had promised Marisol that I would have the community meeting. The storm flooded low streets and lifted planks from the docks. The city wanted rain gardens and stronger bulkheads, and citizens wanted to know why the water had taken such liberties with their lives. Inside the Ballard Community Center, chairs scraped and a projector hummed. Folded tables held a tray of oranges and paper cups filled with coffee that smelled like wet bark and heat. A small crowd formed clusters: fishermen, a pair of teachers, a couple who owned a frame shop near the canal. Marisol moved through the room with a clipboard and an energy that suggested sunlight even where there was none. "You made it," she said, touching my sleeve with a frank kindness that never asked for more than I could give. "You will speak after our landscape person. She will keep it simple. Simple is good," I said. "People deserve straight lines." Marisol followed my gaze. "There she is!" "Sophie." I noticed the sketchbook before I noticed her face. The cover was worn and the edge ribboned with taped plant samples. She stood near the projector, coaxing a laptop to recognize the cable. Her dark hair was pinned back, and a pencil was tucked behind one ear the way a sailor might tuck a match. She lifted her head as if she had felt the room tilt. For a second, it appeared that she was looking past everyone and directly through me. Then she smiled at no one and at everyone. It was not a performance. It was a small light inside the fog. "Do you need a hand?" I heard myself ask, though the cable had already decided to cooperate. "Thank you," she said. It woke up. "That is a good omen. Seattle will accept an omen," I said. "We run on those." Her eyes took careful measures of me, not intruding, only nothing. "You are here with engineering?" "Ethan Hale, Waterfront Structures. Sophie Tran," she said. "Parks and Recreation. Green Infrastructure. I help the water remember where it can go. That is a merciful way to put it." Mercy is usually more practical than it looks. She glanced at the crowd that had started to sit. "Will you speak after? Maybe stay for the questions?" "I will." She nodded once, a quiet promise to return to the conversation. It was nothing. It was more than nothing. I stepped back, and the projector threw a soft rectangle of color against the wall. She opened with a drawing of rain. Not a cloud, not a cartooned blue drop, but tight pencil lines shaded into the contour of the neighborhood map. She spoke about stormwater like a patient. She named streets, slopes, and catch basins, then widened the frame to include the river, the locks, and the sound. She showed where the city could carve shallow swales and plant native grasses that would drink the excess. She held up a photo of a curb cut that had failed and another that had quietly saved a corner. Her voice had the texture of linen and held steady when a fisherman asked in a flat tone why his shop had been a lake for a day and a half. Because the system did exactly what it was built to do, she said, gentle, and then she showed how that system was never meant for the storm we just had. She did not scold the past. She asked the room to walk into the future with both hands open. Later, I spoke about timber piles and steel brackets and the difference between a surface scar and a structural wound. I kept it free of jargon. I traced the pressure points with a simple pen and gave a list of actions that could begin tomorrow if the budget allowed. When someone asked how long any of this would hold, I allowed the truth to stay in the light. Nothing resists water forever, I said. Strength is not a statue. It is maintenance. I saw Sophie lower her eyes and smile as if she recognized a line she might have said herself. The questions came. People wanted reassurance and real steps. We gave them both. By the time the room thinned, the rain had softened to a mist that did not fall so much as hang in the air, waiting for a passing sleeve. Marisol relieved volunteers who stacked chairs and thanked us as if we had built a bridge on the spot. Sophie closed her sketchbook. She brushed an eraser crumb from her sleeve. You made it sound human, she said to me. It is human, I answered. People touch it. People walk on it. People trust it. I hesitated. I appreciated the way you told the water to be honest. She laughed, a warm, unpolished note. I asked it. It rarely listens. It does, however, respect shape. May I buy you a coffee? I asked, surprised by my own voice, by the steadiness inside it. I have to walk the site, she said, glancing at the window. I promised Parks an updated field note by noon. The sunrise tomorrow will be clear if the forecast behaves. Would you meet me at the East Dock? 6:30? 6:30 is possible, I said. I like the city when it still believes it is night. Then let us confirm the city's belief. East Dock. First light. She looked at my rolled drawings. Bring your numbers. I will bring shape. Outside, the air had that cold breath that belongs to water and to the hour between plans and action. I walked with my hands in my coat pockets and thought about how some mornings remained from another life. Hannah loved mornings. She had opened the curtains wide as if she had discovered a secret and wanted to tell it to the sky. She had placed a small plant on the sill that followed the light like prayer. In those days, I had believed that the future would be a straight line with small surprises, nothing sharp enough to cut. I paused under a maple that had not yet leafed out. The street shimmered with reflected windows. A bus murmured by. The bakery below my apartment would have already spun the mixer. The smell would climb the stairwell and greet me in the narrow hall. I felt the old ache open and not swallow me whole. It surprised me every time. Grief is a tide that never asks permission, I said under my breath, but you learn when to set your feet. Daniel called me on my walk home. I imagined him in the quiet after the night shift, the fluorescent buzz still ghosting around his head. You sound awake, he said. I attended a meeting. I am to meet a landscape architect at dawn, a dawn appointment, he said. Either you are in trouble or you are alive. Maybe both. He let the silence hold. How are you, Ethan? Not the numbers. I am weary, I said, and hopeful in a way that feels like a very careful experiment. That is the only kind worth running, he said. Text me when you return from the dock, so I know you did not fall in. I will. Sleep, Daniel. The stairs to my place creaked in their familiar register. I set the drawings on the table and the thermos in the sink. I opened the top drawer without thinking and traced the circle of metal with my eyes. I did not lift it. I did not close the drawer too quickly either. I let the ring rest in its quiet, and I let the morning arrange itself on the other side of the glass. I set the alarm for 5:30. I laid out my boots on the mat. The rain faded to nothing. Somewhere low along the water, a foghorn spoke to another. I studied my hands, the small cuts along the knuckles from a week of inspections, and I saw how they had healed without my attention. I did not know what would happen at the dock. I only knew that the city would lift its gray lid for a moment, and a color would rush in that I had not bothered to name in a long time. I did not need sunshine, I thought. I needed someone who would stand with me through the weather. I turned off the lamp. The room became a quiet harbor. The night went on with its work. The dock held last night like a shallow bowl. The boards were slick, and a silver skin ran across the water that the breeze kept rearranging. A ferry horn sounded from far down the sound, low and patient. I checked the tide chart I had folded into my notebook. The water would rise another foot before it fell away. The pilings below me were dark with algae halfway up their height, a clean watermark that told a recent story without any adjectives. The city drew its first breath. Windows went from black to gray. A jogger passed with a hood up and a headlamp that blinked like a lighthouse for no one. The clouds were not committed to rain. They were thin and indifferent, smeared with the possibility of light. Sophie arrived with her sketchbook and a canvas tote that looked like it had spent years in wet grass. "Good morning," she said, and it sounded like an agreement rather than a greeting. "Morning," I said. "You were right. The sky intends to be clear." She stepped to the edge and knelt, careful with her balance. She touched the surface with 2 fingers as if the water were an acquaintance she trusted enough to greet but not to embrace. "Colder than last week," she said. "That will slow uptake in new plantings." "We can adjust the depth of the swales," I answered. "Hold more until the soil wakes." She looked at me as if pleased that numbers could speak in the language of plants. "Let us walk," she said. We moved along the east dock, boards clicking under our boots in a steady rhythm. She paused at a drain that had backed up during the storm. Sediment had settled into a crescent where the grate met the curb. She made a quick graphite study of the arc, the way a violinist might test a string for tone. I measured the float damage on a cleat, called out the distance, and logged the note. The air smelled of salt, creosote, and the bitter comfort of coffee from a truck at the corner that was just opening its window. At the first pocket park, Sophie crouched and pressed a small corner into the ground. She drew up a tidy column of soil and broke it with her thumb. "Compaction is the enemy," she said. "Roots will turn sideways if we don't loosen this. The rain garden will act like a puddle with aspirations. We can scarify," I said. "Add grooved cedar baffles below the surface along the inflow. It will keep water from carving a single channel," she sketched as I spoke, quickly lines becoming form. "I appreciate when numbers do not bully shape," she said. "Shape keeps numbers honest," I said. She smiled, not at me but at the conversation that had found its lane. We reached a section where the dock narrowed. A gull lifted from a post and slapped the air over our heads. A film of algae made the board shine like glass. My heel slid, and I shifted my weight too late. My hand shot for the rail. Before panic could lace the moment, Sophie caught my forearm with both hands and steadied me, feet planted, body calm. Her grip was strong and warm, and for a second, I felt a current move through me that had nothing to do with the tide. "Careful," she said softly. "We need you the entire length of this project." "I will pretend that was for the city," I said, breathing out. "It was," she said. "Mostly." We stayed there longer than necessary. The water lifted, touched the pier edge, and fell back as if to demonstrate restraint. I realized that I was smiling in a way that did not feel like an apology. We reached the park office trailer by the ball fields. The grass was damp and shone with the faintest suggestion of green beyond winter's tired brown. She rolled the corner in a rag and set it in her tote. "We will need a materials list by Thursday," she said. "Marisol asked for a combined memo by Friday. I told her we could deliver something real, then we will deliver something real," I said. "I will handle the structural notes and the cost bands. You handle plant palettes and hydrologic modeling. I will make my numbers polite. I will keep my shapes sober," she said. The coffee truck hissed. We walked over and ordered 2 plain cups. Steam climbed into the cold like white handwriting. We stood facing the water, cups between our palms. "Why public work?" I asked. "You could design for private clients and never touch a clogged drain." "I tried that," she answered. "Beautiful courtyards that did not belong to anyone who could not buy them. I wanted to place shade over children who would not have had it otherwise. I wanted to slow water where it would otherwise take a shortcut through a neighbor's living room." She took a sip. "Also, my mother taught school. She believed that the point of any craft was to give it away without losing it." "Your mother sounds like someone who understood tensile strength," I said. "She did," Sophie said, smiling into the cup. "What about you? Why the work that holds weight?" "My father fixed radios," I said. "He liked when the noise became signal. I liked when a line on paper became something that would not fail when a family stepped on it." I paused, and I made a choice that felt like walking onto thinner ice with a rope tied around my waist. "My wife died 1.5 years ago. I liked the work before. After, I needed it. The peers did not ask me for anything that I could not give." She did not rush to answer. She let the truth have its space. "I am sorry," she said at last. "Sorry for what you carry, and grateful that you told me. If you need me to walk quieter in certain rooms, tell me." "Thank you," I said. "I am learning that healing is not a finish line. It is a practice." She nodded, and for a breath the wind lifted and the surface ripped like thin silk. We mapped a small circuit after coffee. She flagged 3 corners where curb cuts could be widened without disrupting parking, and I marked a brace that needed replacement before the next high wind. A shop owner came out with a broom, pushed water from his doorway, and asked if the city would pay for the lost days. Sophie gave him a number at parks for small business relief, and I promised a temporary ramp by dusk. He did not thank us exactly. His face eased a degree which counted. It was nearly 8 by the time we returned to the dock entrance. Sunlight found a strip between buildings and painted the water the color of a new coin. A dog shook itself on the path and smiled in a way dogs do not know is generous. "I will draft the field note," Sophie said. "I can send by noon. Will you add the pile assessment before 3? "Yes," I said. "I have a mid-morning inspection near the locks." "I can stop at a quiet bench afterward and edit. Leave the rain garden diagram to me," she said. "Marisol likes arrows and patience." "Both are available," I said. She tucked the pencil behind her ear. "Thank you for not falling in." "Thank you for making sure that I did not." We exchanged numbers with the same calm we had used to exchange measurements. Not hurried, not hesitant. It felt like part of work. It felt like part of something else. After we parted, I walked the length of the pier again. I checked the bracket I had promised. I measured twice as if to make certainty obedient. A text from Daniel arrived. "You alive?" I typed. "Yes." Dock, coffee, plan. I almost fell. "Saved by a landscape architect," he replied. "That is a sentence with intrigue. Proud of you. Send me your memo later. I like reading about drains when I am not draining people." I smiled. The ferry horn was called once more, shorter, as if to mark the hour. I crossed the bridge back toward the office suite, where my team shared desks and a light table that had seen better ballast. The corridor smelled like sawdust and old paper. I laid my notebook open and began the memo with simple headings. Scope observed conditions. Immediate needs. Recommendations. I slid Sophie's number into the corner of the page like a bookmark I would not lose. At noon, her field note arrived. The email contained a sketch that made the block look inevitable. Swales braided politely around trees. A native palette listed in careful rows. She had included a note to me that read, "Adjust as you see fit. Shape can take criticism." I sent back my edits and added a line at the end that I almost deleted and then did not. "The sunrise made our measurements kind." She replied with a single sentence. "Kindness is also infrastructure." I sat with that. The room hummed. outside the day had brightened beyond my expectation. I closed my eyes and saw the way her hands had steadied my arm, firm and sure, not afraid of the cold. I did not need the storm to end. I needed a sunrise that I could stand under without bracing. The city had offered that, and a person had too. I returned to the cost bands and the diagrams, but my pulse kept a different tempo, one that did not rush, one that did not retreat. The temporary ramp fits like a sentence that finally found its verb. I set the last screw and sighted along the grain to make sure the incline met the door without a lip that could trip a hurried step. The shop owner watched from inside with a broom leaning against his shoulder. He did not speak until I stood, wiped my hands in a rag, and tested the swing of the door. "It clears," I said. "It will serve until the city replaces the threshold." He nodded, the line between his brows loosening. "Thank you," he said at last. "I will reopen at noon." "Have someone call if the angle creeps after the first rain," I answered. "Wood behaves like a person on a long day." He gave a quiet laugh. "I know that behavior," he said, and he set the broom aside to prop the door with a wedge. A gull watched from the lamppost as if presiding. The light was clean and cold, with a small warmth tucked behind it like a promise. I took a photo of the ramp and sent the image to Marisol with a short note. "Temporary ramp installed. No charge." Her reply came back seconds later. "You are good people, Ethan," Sophie texted a minute after. "Park crew can widen curb cut on Friday. I will mark the swale outline with chalk." She added a photo of her sketch pad with the park block drawn in fine lines, arrows like gentle currents. She wrote arrows and patience. I stood there with the empty street in my periphery and felt how a day could build a structure out of small choices. Some promises were small bridges. We crossed them without ceremony. At the office, I refined the memo. I added the ramp photo as an appendix and a brief note about the brace replacement schedule. I sent it to Sophie for a last glance and to Marisol for the committee. The light table clicked when I switched it off. The room smelled like paper warmed by the lamps. Daniel called while I ate a bowl of soup at my desk. "I have 30 minutes before training," he said. "Tell me a good thing." "A shop door opened smoothly," I said, "and I walked a dock without falling." He let the quiet applaud. "That is excellent," he said. "How is the landscape architect who caught your arm?" "She is effective," I said. "She asks the water to be honest, and it sometimes listens." "I like her already," he said. "Be kind to yourself while you are kind to the city." "Kindness is also infrastructure," I said, and heard the smile in his silence. By late afternoon, thin rain began, the kind that never seems to fall but manages to cover every surface all the same. Sophie asked if I could meet her at the city greenhouse to discuss plant availability. I said yes, and I walked the length of a bus route to where the low glass roofs gathered the light and the damp rolled in waves like breath. Inside, heat rose to the rafters and clung there. Rows of young trees stood with their tags flickering in the air movement from a small fan. Flats of grasses and sedges made a modest choir of green. Soil scent and the sweetness of damp leaves made the world feel louder and then quieter again. Sophie stood near a pallet of coiled horses, her jacket collar darkened by the rain. She had her sketchbook open to a page with the park corner drawn and a plant list arranged in 3 columns: function, species, quantity. She handed me a pencil. "Tell me where the maintenance will fail first," she said. "We will solve that before we make it beautiful." "Downstream swell," I said, tapping the page. "The lowest corner of the block has a habit of accepting everyone else's problem. It will need the deepest roots." She moved along the bench and lifted a pot. "Carax will do the quiet work," she said. "Juncus will stand and show people where the edge is. Salal under the cherry tree for the shade and for the glossy leaves that will forgive winter." We walked between benches as she spoke to leaves and stems like a teacher addressing an attentive class. Her hands shaped the air when she described how water would move along a shallow scoop, speed up slow, and then sink. She did not romanticize dirt. She respected it. "Can you meet volunteers on Saturday morning?" she asked, glancing over the rim of a pot. Marisol is recruiting. I will order the plant pickup for early delivery. Yes, I said. I will bring tools and a short briefing that will not sound like a lecture. I will bribe the volunteers with muffins, she said. Bribery is acceptable when it saves a basement. Outside, the rain had settled into a hush. She walked me to the door, paused, and then stepped back into the greenhouse to retrieve an umbrella that she had seen many mornings. We shared it along the short path to the street. Have you always lived in Seattle? She asked. Since graduate school, I said. Hannah and I planned to move south after a few years. We made lists. We performed the ritual where you circle apartments you will never live in. I shook my head at the memory's tenderness. We stayed. The water argued its case and won. Sophie listened with her shoulders angled in a way that welcomed truth without leaning hard against it. I left a different promise, she said after a few quiet steps. I was engaged once. He wanted a life that would be pristine and rehearsed. I wanted a life that could survive mud. We set each other free before the ceremony could teach us that lesson, the loud way she tilted the umbrella toward me when the wind turned. I do not regret the leaving. I do regret how long I told myself that leaving meant failure. Not all departures are collapses, I said. Some departures are reinforcements. She breathed out, not quite a laugh. Hope is not a forecast, she said. It is a design choice. We reached the corner where our paths split. She closed the umbrella and shook it gently. The last of the rain sifted into the air. I will confirm the delivery for Saturday, she said. I will also send a draft of the signage for the site. People like to know what they are building while they are building it. Words on a sign can carry more than instructions, I said. They can carry respect. She held my eyes for a long second. It did not feel like a test. It felt like a shared step onto a new plank. Thank you for meeting me here, she said. Thank you for asking, I answered. Back at my apartment, the bakery below had closed for the day, and the stairwell held only the faint memory of flour and heat. I set my wet jacket near the door and walked to the small dresser. The top drawer slid open with its soft, familiar scrape. The ring shone as a small circle that had defined a very large map. I lifted it, and for the first time since summer, I did not place it back immediately. I stood with it in my palm, the cold metal warming slowly. I carried it to the dresser top and set it in a shallow dish beside the plant that had survived 3 winters. It would live in the light now. I could visit it without hiding. I made notes for Saturday's briefing. I planned a 10-minute tool talk, a demonstration of soil scarifying, and a schedule for rotating tasks so that no one would leave sore in a way that would make volunteers less likely to return. I wrote a 1-sentence thesis at the top of the page. We are here to slow water with beauty and care. Marisol called near 9. Her voice carried the smile she used to welcome new people to familiar rooms. The committee liked your memo, she said. They liked Sophie's drawings more, but that is because pictures beat words when the words belong to engineers. Pictures deserve the win, I said. Saturday is confirmed, she said. We have shovels, gloves, and optimism. See you at 8. When the apartment took on that late quiet that keeps its own counsel, I sent Daniel a short message. Saturday planting. I moved the ring into the light. He wrote back a heart and the words, proud of you. I turned off the lamp and watched the dark lift and settle like a slow tide. The city exhaled. Somewhere a bus sighed and moved on. The rain withdrew into the corners of the night. I felt the experiment inside me continuing, steady and precise, the way a bridge learns its own weight after the scaffolding leaves. I lay down without rehearsing the past. The face that rose behind my eyes belonged to a woman with a pencil behind her ear and hands that had steadied me in cold air. I did not ask the moment to mean more than it did. It already meant enough. Morning sat lightly over the block when I arrived, pale and steady, the kind of light that makes every surface look honest. Marisol had arranged a folding table with muffins and a jug of coffee, and a handwritten sign read, "Volunteers welcome." A cluster formed neighbors with gloves in their back pockets. a teacher with weekend energy, a retired couple who had served on neighborhood councils until councils were replaced by kitchens and slow breakfasts. Sophie stood beside a roll of twine and stakes, her sketchbook open to the plan. She met each person with the same measured warmth, explaining the swales with her palms opening as if lifting a shallow bowl. The signage leaned against the table, a clean rectangle that read, Rain Garden Pilot, a partnership between community, parks, and public works. At the bottom, a single line. Please help the water slow down. I gave a 10-minute tool talk that focused on ankles, pacing, and respect for shovels. I demonstrated scarifying with a 3-tine cultivator. This is not a war with the ground, I said. This is a conversation. I pointed to the marked arcs on the curb. We will widen these cuts a little, shape the bed so water wanders, not rushes. We will place plants that prefer wet feet, Sophie added a simple rhythm. 2 crews digging, she said. 1 crew planting following the flags. 1 crew watering and tamping. We will rotate. Nobody gets heroic. Rest anytime and eat the muffins that have no patience for moderation. We began. The sound of spades against soil took on a pleasing pattern. Mud clung to boots. Flags held in brisk little angles as if cheering. Sophie moved like a conductor who also played an instrument, placing grass with one hand while redirecting 2 volunteers with the other. I cut the first curb slot, careful around the concrete's edges, letting the line find a curve that felt inevitable rather than forced. A girl of maybe 9 arrived with her aunt. She wore rain boots with stars and a determination that reminded me of when I had learned to ride a bike in a street that no longer existed under the new zone. She asked, "What can I do that matters?" Sophie crouched. "You can place these small stones along the edge," she said. "We call this a check dam. It slows a very tired puddle so it can sit and breathe." The girl nodded as if entrusted with a secret and set to her task with focus that silenced everyone nearby in a good way. By then, the first bed was shaped, and plants stood ready in clustered groups like teams before starting whistle. Sophie handed me a junkus pot. "Here," she said, "show the edge where to be." I pressed the root ball into the loosened earth, firmed the sides, and stepped back. "Edges are honest if you are," I said. She looked at me in a way that was not surprised but grateful. We worked for long minutes without speaking, the kind of silence that only arrives when the rhythm has arrived. The forecast had promised to dry until noon. The sky decided to disregard it. A light rain began, timid at first, then steady. Volunteers pulled up hoods and continued. The rain made the soil more cooperative. It also provided a test. Water began to walk the surface the way a child learns about a new neighborhood. "Watch the inflow," Sophie said. We stood at the top of the block and watched water enter the first cut. It slowed along the stones where the girl had built her small wall. It spread into the bed and sank with evident relief. A cheer of relief moved along the volunteers like a ripple. Then the lowest corner took everyone else's problem exactly as expected and more than expected. The old buried pipe under the curb did what old pipes do. It clogged with a mix of leaf litter and finer sediments that had traveled too far in a hurry. Water pooled against the shopfront we had saved with the ramp. The owner appeared with his broom, panicking, already shaping his shoulders. "Blockage," I said, already moving. "I need a pry bar and 2 pairs of hands." Sophie did not waste a second. "Dig a relief channel here," she told the nearest volunteers, and they began carving a shallow path to lead water into the new bed. "You," she said to the girl, "place stones here, gentle, make a second check dam." I knelt at the curb and slid the pry bar into the old scupper. It hit a soft resistance that felt like packed fabric. A volunteer named Matteo crouched with me and used a trowel to loosen the edges. Sophie arrived and placed a burlap sack in my hand. "We will pull the clog and strain the fines," she said. "We will not send the whole problem downstream." The water pressed. The curb hummed. My hands were cold, and I felt the old familiar tunnel vision that comes at the edge of failure. Sophie's hand settled on my shoulder, grounding neither light nor heavy, the exact weight of trust. I worked the bar, felt the obstruction shift, and then I reached in with the burlap and pulled a dark rope of leaves and grit that had pretended to be a wall. Thank you for reading Second Love Tale. If you believe in second chances, like, comment, and share. See you in the next tale, where love finds its way again.